Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian. So today I'm going to do a little bit of a different video. I'm going to do like the blast from the past type of video where I'm going to go over all the decks that have survived, from what I remember being the very early stages of Hearthstone, still through all the way through the meta where we are now. And I want to do this video because while we don't know quite yet how things will change with Blackrock, we will know probably a week, maybe even less than that, maybe a little bit more if things change up a little bit after all the wings have been released, and to see, just the things that we can learn. So I'm going to go over the decks that really have stood the test of time so far. There's a few honorable mentions, those that have almost stood the test of time, and that first one is actually Zulok. I have not seen Zulok almost at all in recent tournaments. I have basically never seen it on ladder past rank 19, 18, and sometimes I'm there because I'm playing on my free account. And Zulok was a pretty interesting deck. The first version of Zulok was actually played, what I remember, from Team Liquid, around the time where I attended BlizzCon, which was the 2013 BlizzCon. So, November-ish 2013. It was a pretty popular deck, played by very few. The information, moving around Reddit and moving around websites with decks, what's good, what's not good, the meta, that was really slow at that time, and some players played this deck unnoticed for a very long time. So what made it strong is Novice Engineer. Novice Engineer was a 1/2 that drew a card for 2 mana, so you had an extra bonus health point, and that basically made it an auto-include in every single deck, as well as Flame Imp used to only do 2 damage to you, which was a pretty big deal, and Argus was a 3/3, Shattered Sun was a 3/3, so you had all these like granular minions that were good enough, and the buff minions were much more powerful than the other ones, and that kind of got nerfed big time. Actually, like everything in the Zulok got nerfed, but Reynad, of course, popularized the really, really big Zulok at the turn of Nax, so that was kind of like the second wind. But when it came to the release of GVG, Zulok ended its somewhat long streak of, turns out paladins with shielded minibots and muster for battle deal with these crappy minions extremely well, so much so that you can't actually play the deck. It's just kind of like a slightly worse version of Mech Mage is the closest comparison. It's just not good enough these days, and I really haven't seen it for months. So it was a pretty cool tech. Next up is Miracle Rogue. Miracle Rogue was probably the oldest popularized deck that I remember. I remember people playing Miracle Rogue before the ranked system in Hearthstone actually had ranks. This is, of course, in beta, and people liked Miracle Rogue because it was kind of fun, and because rogue cards, there's too many to list. Every single rogue card in the game at that point was absurd. Absolutely absurd. Like, Backstab was just deal 2 damage for 0. I guess you couldn't do it to face, but you get the point. Just everything was totally insane. And you didn't even have to play this deck well. You just drew your whole deck and killed your opponent. And when it came to expansions being released through Nax and a little bit through GVG, it kind of worked out. But the fact that the Gadsden Auctioneer was nerfed to 6 mana, that was like the biggest nail in the coffin ever. Okay, and then there was the Leroy thing, so you couldn't Leroy Shadow Step, Leroy Shadow Step, Leroy, all in the same turn, and then do like way too much damage. Yeah, that didn't work too well anymore. Also, Control Warriors got pretty popular. So I feel like Zulok and Miracle Rogue are kind of like out. But what are still in? Like right now, in the midst of Blackrock, I'm still seeing these decks. So number 1 is Freeze Mage. You'd be interested to know that Freeze Mage is actually also played in the very early stages of Hearthstone. In fact, in the beta, I remember maybe a month or 2 in that Rekful was actually playing a Freeze Mage deck, and it was a very similar deck that he brought and played against me in the semifinals at BlizzCon in 2013, and he did pretty well with it. I think he made a few mistakes in that game, but as did most Hearthstone players of that time. And it's not not too much has changed since then. The concepts are still very similar. You set up Ice Block, you maybe use an Alistraza to manipulate your health or your opponent's, and you kill your opponent with Overpowered Burn, which at the time was much more overpowered. Pyroblast costing 8 mana, and most of the freeze spells costing 1 less mana than, actually, all of them costing 1 less mana than what they cost now. But the theme of the deck was basically the same. Draw into these powerful spells, these powerful freezes, these powerful board clears, and manipulate the game by extending extra turns through Ice Block. And, well, in very similar fashion, this deck is still being played today in basically the exact same way, and we see it in tournaments, and it's doing quite well. And it may actually be the oldest withstanding deck that I know of. Next up, another one that's stood the test of time is Handlock. I actually played Handlock probably about a week after I think it was created. When I was practicing for BlizzCon in 2013, there was a player that I practiced with, Silas. Silas was a really cool dude, but I haven't heard from him in a very long time, and he claimed to have made this deck on his own. I actually have a YouTube video of it, which I'll link you guys at the end. I have linked it a few times in the past too, and it's basically like the stage 1 of Handlock. At the time, it actually wasn't very good. It was mostly a joke deck, because at the time, everybody was playing like Face Mage, Zoo Mage, or Freeze Mage. So you putting up taunts and shit didn't really matter, because every deck had 2 Pyroblasts. So yeah, you'd get to like 10 life and be like, hey, what's up, bro? Molten Giant, Defender of Argus. And then the mage would just be like, Pyroblast. And then Frostbolt, because Pyroblast only cost 8 mana back then. So it was mostly a joke deck. It did pretty poorly in tournaments back then, but actually when they nerfed Mage and when Zoo started to pop up, this deck was just, insane all of a sudden. But it played exactly the same way then as it did today. As you guys can see, you have the Ancient Watchers, you have the freebie minions, you clear with Shadow Flame, you clear with Hellfire, you spawn taunts, you stay alive with Jiraxxus every now and then, and really the core, the type of gameplay has been absolutely unchanged since way back then, and it's still viable. A lot of these days we see a lot more Demon Lock than we see Handlock, but it's not extinct, certainly not in tournaments, and certainly not in ladder. The other one that kind of popped up a little bit later, but has still had a very interesting run, is the Control Warrior. Now, Control Warrior seems to continuously get stronger, except maybe in Blackrock actually it doesn't particularly get stronger, but we'll see how that turns out. The first Control Warrior, I remember one of the players from Team Doggy House, after like the second season of ESGN, Nix, sent me a list. He's like, hey man, try this deck, it's pretty hilarious. I know Artosis at the time was playing it. This is like maybe January 2014, and this is when the ladder was like new. I won like 25 games with this deck, lost like 2. I think this is the highest rank I've ever been in Hearthstone, because I actually had so much fun playing this deck. I got to like rank 1 or rank 2 or something like that before I got bored and stopped playing it. And the deck is very similar to the Control Warrior now, where you just gain a bunch of armor, you have the efficient clears of the weapons, you do this, you do that to just stay alive, stay in it, and you have a super cool finisher. But the super cool finisher back then was way cooler than the super cool finisher these days, where these days you just grow mash with a Death Spite, and you do the 14 damage hit, and 14 is basically the magic number for druids as well, so players kind of built the meta around this, so it's a little bit safer. But back then, Alistraza's Battle Cry actually reduced your armor as well. So if you had like, I don't know, let's say you had 2,000 armor and 30 health, well, you would lose all your armor and go to 15 health from an Alistraza Battle Cry. So that was kind of fun. So what people did back then is they used Gorehowl in conjunction with Alistraza, in conjunction with the pre-nerf Charge card. I'm sure you guys had no clue about this one if you haven't been playing for more than a year. Charge used to cost 0 mana. It didn't actually buff the attack, but what you would do is you would develop Gorehowl, and then next turn you would Alistraza your opponent for 9, play Charge, and, well, you win. Sometimes you'd need to like execute one of their minions on the way, but Alistraza's 8, which also removed all of the armor, and Gorehell 7, 15. Who would have thunk it? So this shit got nerfed pretty quick, and it took, I think, a month or two before the modern Control Warrior started seeing some play. A lot of people credit Kit Kats for that version. I don't really know the story too well, but yeah, it sounds very probable as we've seen him play Warrior forever, and throughout that time play it quite well. So Control Warrior is not as old as those decks, but it has survived. You know, it gets a little bit improved with Nax. It got the ever so valuable Death Spite, and with GVG, the Shield Maiden was just enough, man. It was just that extra little bit of armor that put it on top of the other classes and able to survive all the face rush decks. And lastly, of course, Combo Druid. Now, Combo Druid's a really interesting one. This dates back again to the first few episodes of ESG on Fight Night. And remember, this is a very weird spin on a deck. And it's that at the time, everybody was playing like a Ramp Druid. And the Ramp Druid was pretty good, but it was kind of difficult to finish off your opponent. So about the same time, I saw it, I think it was in like ECOP's decks and in Strifeker was playing this stuff as well. Basically, like, everybody all of a sudden, I think even independently, started playing one Savage Roar, one Force of Nature in their controlled Druid decks. And, you know, like the next episode of Fight Night that we had, it was, you know, everybody was playing fewer big minions and, you know, double Force of Nature, double Savage Roar in a lot of cases, and this kind of stuck on ladder, and this has really never gone away. Like, I think right now with the Blackrock cards, this combo is actually stronger than ever because of the mana manipulation in some of the cards released. So, you know, some of the crazy stuff that Druid's been doing, they've basically gotten nothing all the way through. I mean, yeah, you got, like, you know, a few cards in Nax, a few cards in GVG, like, the Shredders are pretty good because you get a little bit of extra damage. The Shade of Naxxramas are pretty good because you make your combo a little bit stronger, but, you know, they didn't really get anything. The deck plays exactly the same. You just play some annoying crap and then, well, way too much damage. Savage Roar, Force of Nature, hello. So, yeah. There's a few things that these decks have in common. Most of them are either extremely combo-oriented or they're control-oriented. And the thing to really see is that a lot of these decks, they just haven't received enough significant changes. So it really shows the point that most of the cards that are being added to the game are aggressive. Because, like, you know, there's a different Mage aggressive deck, there's a different Hunter aggressive deck, you know, there's different Warlock aggressive deck. We might actually see a different Warrior aggressive deck. You know, there's like a more aggressive thing that people are being able to play. And then next expansion, there's an even more aggressive deck that people are playing. But the control decks are largely the same. And, you know, they're pretty powerful, but you know, they're kind of going down. They're going extinct a little bit. But you know, there's no like better control deck. You know, this type of form is not really changing. And you know, I have some faith that with Blackrock we'll see a little bit of dragon control, and well, I'm a little bit optimistic about it, and I hope in the long term at least things will get shifted around a little bit because I do miss the control meta, and I hope to see it at least somewhat soon. Hope you guys liked the Hearthstone history with the Crypt today. Hope you guys enjoyed, you know, going back to the past and hearing about all the cool things that were going on so many months ago. If you guys liked it, enjoy, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.